So again, we appreciate you staying muted so we can get questions and answers later. Put your question in the chat. If you cannot use the chat, you certainly can ask a question out loud, but we don't encourage that because it's just not helpful to the large group. And we're over 100 people now on the call. So it is recorded and closed captioning is available as usual. Alicia is going to give you an overview of the Self-Direction Act, the core elements, and then we will go into each of those in a little bit more depth. For those of you that may not remember or may not know, that we had a bill in Annapolis 3 years running, and the third year, through a tremendous amount of advocacy, we were successful in getting this the Self-Direction Act passed. And in essence, the motivation was to hold on to or to recapture some of the choice and control and flexibilities that were slowly being eroded. So that gives you a little bit of background, and Alicia will give you the specifics. There you go, Alicia. Next.
Great. Next. Okay. So as Patty was saying, the Self-Direction Act of 2022 passed last legislative session, went into effect in October of this past year. And we expect that most of the rest of the pieces will be available when the waiver is renewed, and that is expected to be July 1st, 2023. The waiver was written in a broad way. And so this gives us continued opportunity to work with policy, have as a group of stakeholders to present DDA with our stakeholder input. And so we would ask that you kind of join in. We are intending to email you when policies are out, draft policies are out, and hope that you will read along and respond with us when it's appropriate. Next slide. So I'm just going to hit some of the highlights of the law from last year. The first one is it allows support broker hours up to 30 a month and restores the scope of work that CMS had originally planned for support brokers. Support brokers can be an incredibly valuable resource, an extra set of eyes, ears, and head for doing plans, keeping track of budgets, helping employees and employers to get the employees. So we are pretty excited that these number of hours has gone up and will be accessible for most people who need it. So it will obviously depend on your team and the assessed need of the person, how many hours a person would need. The Act removes the $5,000 cap for individual family-directed goods and services. Those services will be based on the needs of the person and can include a wide variety of things. And so again, team meetings with support brokers and participants will be, I guess, the way you would just, discuss what could be used for individual family-directed goods and services funds. The law requires a training of CCSs on self-directed services. So we're really looking forward to seeing what DDA comes up with in terms of a training program. We've been pushing on this for a while because things are fast moving and fast changing in DDA. And so keeping us all up to date is really critical for the system to work well. This bill required people to be informed about all waiver options annually, regardless of whether you're in self-direction or in a traditional provider. Each year, the CCS is supposed to tell a person that both are available. It allowed for transportation reimbursement for specialized vehicles. That is currently available now. So if you are a family that has a specialized vehicle, a DSP can drive that family vehicle and the owner of the vehicle can get reimbursed for mileage. Allows for hiring a manager to assist with staff and home. These are administrative hours, not direct care hours. And this should help with one of our core interests at this point is sustainability of self-direction when family can no longer be doing that for free. So it will also allow for some administrative expenses like internet. It requires parity in funding, parity between traditional and self-direction. That's how we sort of arrived at the rates-based budgeting. Let's see. Oh, transparency in process. So this is it should be a really excellent addition. At this point, when a CCS puts in your plan, the participant really doesn't know that it's been submitted, where it is in the process, whether DDA has come back and asked for clarifications. You're sort of all at the moment at the mercy of the CCS communicating all these pieces with you. Eventually, we're told approximately in May, we will be able to start seeing the process of the PCP, for example, in its progression. So it will be a read-only access to LTSS to monitor progress. There will be a phase 2 with more access, but it will probably be many months down the road. The bill ensures overnight supports for participants with assessed need, both awake and supervised. And we're going to talk about some of these things in more detail as we progress in this PowerPoint. It ensures that family as staff remains an option, and it ensured the choice of 3 FMCSs. And you can see at the bottom, the items that are starred will come out of the unallocated funds. In other words, funds that there won't be additional rate per hour add-ons for this. This will come out of funds not used for other things. So I hope that helps to get you up to date in terms of what you can expect to see going forward. Next slide. I think Carol's going to start talking a little bit about the details of some of the things that we just touched on.
Carol, you want to unmute?
Okay, now
There you
I'm
go.
having many technical difficulties here this morning. So this is the definition of what a support broker does from the 2022 bill, and it is basically assisting with any aspect of doing self-direction, so helping the person make decisions, managing services, informing people what their options are, advocating for the person and what they need, accessing and managing identified supports and services, which is all support brokers should know what the waiver says. All support brokers should know what the definitions are and be able to advocate for the person to get the services they need. And then other tasks that the individual assigns to them as allowed by CMS, which is pretty broad definition. One aspect of this bill was that what the point was that Maryland make no restrictions that are more restrictive than the federal government requires. Next slide. All right, so a support broker can now have up to 30 hours a month allocated in the budget, but all but 4 hours of that would be coming out of unallocated funds. So you can still get up to 4 hours added on to your budget, but anything other is considered an administrative expense that comes out of this unallocated fund. Assist the participant with employer authority. Employer authority is locating and finding, hiring and training staff. Assist the participant with budget authority. So you have an entire budget. You have budget authority on how to use it. You can choose to hire employees for anything that's a direct support person, direct support like personal support, community development, or you could hire an agency that provides community development or employment services. If you hire an agency, that would be using it as budget authority rather than employer authority. But you have overall control of your budget, and the Self-Direction Act was trying to make that overall control as flexible as possible and try to get back to the way it was intended when it started in Maryland. Ensures that a participant always has a support broker when family is staffed to ensure the team approach and person-centered plan. TDA has a lot of concerns about conflict of interest, and when families work, that was the thing that we kept running into. When self-direction started in Maryland in 2005, the support broker was required. DDA changed that several years ago. And so in order to help them feel more comfortable about the conflict of interest, we suggested that in the case of family, support broker is required so that they know that there's a third party there that's truly looking out for the participant. Not that we feel that there's widespread fraud or anything among families working as staff, but just to kind of to take away that argument on the other side. The support broker always should advocate for the person. The support broker originally was the primary advocate for the person. Support broker is supposed to be the expert on self-direction and know what is available and advocate to make sure that the participant has what they need. Next slide, please. Day-to-day administrative supports. So even with a support broker and even with a support broker getting 30 hours a month, if you have a person who is in their own home and has 24/7 supports, there's still a lot of on the ground day-to-day things that need to be done. For lack of a better term, it can be called the mom role. Things that parents automatically have been taken care of in their own homes, but when the participant no longer has a parent or a family member to help them, or is in their own home and the parents are not able to do it anymore, this position is an administrative position that again comes out of the administrative portion of the rate. So therefore it's paid out of otherwise unallocated funds. If you choose to have this, then you have to make choices about other things like the pay rate of staff, benefits, and that kind of thing. But somebody with a 24/7 budget can pretty easily take out the day-to-day administrative supports from the rate that we get for personal supports. This person is kind of the manager of the house, makes sure that that all the supplies are there, things that is needed to run a household, and you don't run out of food, you don't run out of toilet paper, that kind of thing, that all the medical appointments are scheduled. They would be working in concert with the support broker. The source of, I already said that. At this point, DDA is saying that the category may show up under IFDGS because IFDGS is uncapped now, but an IFDGS, which is individual family directed goods and services, is coming out of unallocated funds. We're not sure if that's going to be where it winds up on the budget sheet or not, but that was the last thing that we had to them. Okay, I think that's the end of me. Next slide.
Next slide.
Mm.
And Liz, I think that you're up on this one.
Okie dokie. Hey, everybody. Let's see. So LTSS Maryland, for those who don't know what it is it's the case management system that that Maryland uses. Providers have access to it. CCSs have access to it, and it's how they track participants and how they, track their waivers. They open, if they want to revise the plan, they open the plan, they go in and edit it, they close it. And it also keeps, a calendar, this many days you have. And so it just manages the whole plan. And why that's important to us that we be able to see it is that right now, you have no visibility. So your plan might be up for renewal, you don't know. But most importantly, when you're working on your plan and you said, okay, it's good to go, you don't know when it gets submitted. You don't know if there are clarification requests. It just kind of falls off, and then you hope to get an approval. And a lot of time can pass, and you just don't know where you are on a lot of things unless the CCS tells you. So this way you'll have visibility into that process. You'll be able to see where the plan is, when it was submitted, if there are clarification requests, what they are, when the reviewer has picked it up, when, all that, all through, and be able to stay on top of your plan. So right now, as Alicia said, it's scheduled to come out in May. It's it's a web thing. You log in and you'll be able to see it. You'll only have view-only access, but it will be really good. I hope a lot of people will be able to take advantage of it. I'm not sure what the I can't recall what the enhanced options are, but just getting access to see that stuff is going to be awesome. Right, thanks.
Okay, next slide. And I think Patty, you're up.
Okay, so during the time that we were advocating for the Self-Direction Act and all of the work we were doing with the legislators at that time, the conversation about overnight supports was being had. And we were, we used to be able to have overnight supports. It went away, and we were advocating for it to come back. So during our conversations and prior to the act being passed unanimously in both the House and the Senate, DDA agreed to the provision of overnight supports. So it currently is a service option. So a person could have overnight supports, either supervision or awake. And in Deputy Secretary Simon's words, it doesn't really matter, right? If somebody needs supports, if you're there for supervision and the person wakes and has an assessed need, has a need, you need to wake up and take care of that need. So the word awake doesn't really hold as much weight as it used to, or as it did in traditional. Because if you think of traditional services, residential, there is a staff person there. There just is one. So when people were seeking an additional staff person for a one-to-one, they would call that awake overnight. They were asking for a second staff person to be dedicated to a particular person's needs. Well, we don't already have a person, right, in self-direction. There's not already a staff person working overnight. So some people who are self-directing need that first person. They need a person to be there in case something happens. And we refer to that as supervision. In case the alarms go off, in case somebody comes through the door, in case they get sick, any of those reasons that come to your mind already. So we no longer have to really say awake or supervision. We can just say they have an assessed need for staff overnight. This would be personal support staff, but of course we have to justify the assessed need. Why should the taxpayers pay money for a staff person overnight? That's a legitimate question. And the way that we show that is through a nursing care plan or a behavior plan, right? So, I've had to get really good at writing these nursing care plans, and, we had to retool a little bit. I used to be writing them for, Liz? I used to write them to demonstrate, go back. To demonstrate that a person had an intervention that had to happen. They had something that had to be done overnight. Well, now I can write them that the person has health and safety issues. They may need somebody there for evacuation purposes or to respond to emergencies. So we are able to justify. Can you go back to nursing care plans and overnight supports, please? So, thanks. So back to nursing, where we go to overnight.
Overnight. There we go. So overnight supports is currently available under the personal support category.
You do need to demonstrate an assessed need for supervision or actual interventions. And there is a little bit of a rub here. For those of you who do not have a nurse on your team, you don't have nursing case management delegation, there is no nurse to write a care plan. So you'll have to discuss that with your team and with your CCS. And in the situations where this has occurred in my practice, the region has asked me to simply write recommendations because I am only providing consultation or something. So if you do not have a nurse on your team, or the nurse you have is consultation only, there is no care plan, right? So that, but DDA is still asking for something to justify overnight supports. I have been able to do that through simply a recommendations. So as a consulting nurse, write the recommendations to support the person's need. If you have a delegating nurse, that nurse has a care plan. That's part of delegation. So if you have a case managing delegating nurse, they would justify the need in a nursing care plan. If you have behavioral services, then there would be a behavioral plan that would justify the overnight. Okay. In the SDS Act and in the new waiver, there's certainly the option for greater than 82 hours of personal supports if you have the assessed need for such. For those of you who don't know, personal supports has been capped at 82 hours. But you can go over that. It used to be you could go over that with DDA authorization. In the new waiver, we expect that the 82-hour cap to be gone. Of course, everything is based on assessed need and the justification. So go ahead, if you need overnight supports, put it in. And we also suggest that if you have the need for overnight, for whatever assessed needs you have, they should be in your plan. Whether or not DDA is going to say yes to them or not is irrelevant. The plan should reflect the true assessed needs of the individual, not writing only what you think is going to get funded, but truly write your plans to demonstrate the assessed needs that the individual has, regardless of what DDA is going to pay for or not. Okay.
One of the big changes resulting from the Self-Direction Act involved individual and family-directed goods and services. The acronym for that is IFDGS. I'm not a fan of acronyms, but that might be a good one to add to your vocabulary. IFDGS, individual family-directed goods and services. For some people who participate or who do self-direction, IFDGS items really form the heart of their plan or the heart of their day. So if you don't already have them in your plan, consider, look around and consider adding them. But the Act expands, there was a $5,000 cap on IFDGS items. That cap, the Act removes that $5,000 cap as of July 1. Now, remember, the source of those funds is always unallocated funds, even for the $5,000. So you always have to use unallocated funds to pay for these items. But the items, the definition of the items of what's allowable, the Act expanded it to align with the CMS guidelines for IFDGS items. And those guidelines are deliberately broad, which is great. So basically anything that improves the health, well-being of the person or their ability to integrate into their community, that's pretty much, what applies. So, this is a wonderful new benefit. People sometimes ask, well, what items would be allowed for IFDGS? We don't really want a list. We want it, again, to be based on that person's assessed needs. So, for instance, things that might apply are karate lessons, music lessons, riding lessons, climbing lessons, dancing or swimming lessons, fitness activities. All of those things can fall under IFDGS. So if it's not something you've thought of, put on your thinking cap, as my daughter would say, and consider how that might improve the life of the participant, of yourself or the participant that you support. I'm going to add a few tips about IFDGS in a minute or two. Next slide.
Yeah, this is back to me, right? Okay, so
Yes.
Alicia touched on this a bit. Excuse me. The federal, Medicaid waiver. Each state writes the waiver and submits to Center for Medicaid Services on the federal level to have that waiver approved. So, Maryland, we currently have three waivers. So all of you are probably in one of them, or you wouldn't be involved on this meeting. So the waiver is written in broad terms, and it's Maryland's plan for how to serve individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities in the community. And so that waiver right now, all three waivers are up for renewal, right? So their applications are into federal CMS, and they're looking at them, and we're expecting those waivers to be approved. We'll let you know when that comes through, and to go into effect July 1. So the state then looks at the services and all the processes that are in that waiver, and they write policy. And that's what Alicia was alluding to in the beginning. So you see these, they come to you in your emails. If you're on the constant contact list for DDA, you're getting these emails, and they will put out an at-a-glance guidelines or something on a certain policy. That is the state's implementation policy. So they put it out for stakeholder input often, and that's your opportunity to respond, because this is how they're going to do it. I see 100 questions in the chat right now about what you can do. Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? Well, this is where we go. When you ask us these questions, we've got to go to the policy that DDA wrote and tell you the answer. So you can familiarize yourself with those policies as well. They're doing a better job of having those documents on their website than they've ever done in the past. So when that call for stakeholder input goes out, that's the time to voice your opinion. You have a say. As you can tell, we have a pretty strong advocacy base. You've been very successful at getting things done. So voice your concerns about how things are going to be implemented when you see these policies and the stakeholder input request. You can respond to DDA, you can respond to us, you can respond to your support broker, and then maybe they'll get in touch with us. But we want that input so that we can design the policy from the start versus react to the policy and have to try to get things undone. So just know when this waiver is renewed, there'll be some broad categories there and some broad language, and they're going to follow it up with policy. And if we don't put our input in there, we will not like some of the policy they come out with. Okay, so that's what this is about. If you can, I know it's a lot. It is a lot, and you're inundated and you're already busy and life is complicated. But if you have a mind to and the energy to, give us your feedback when you see these stakeholder input on these policies. Okie doke. Next.
Here are just a few tips for when you're changing your PCP and your budget for this coming year, or as you're changing it. Be aware that line item budget goes to the FMCS. DDA may not even review it. They are going to look at the service authorization section of the plan. So what we have noticed lately is that sometimes the service authorization page, some people call it the DSA, detailed service authorization page. It's the same thing. That DSA, or the service authorization page, may not exactly match your budget. If that happens, then once everything gets to the FMCS, they're going to come back and say, this doesn't match. So an important thing for your team to do while you're planning is to sit down with the CCS and have them go through, and the support broker, check that detailed service authorization page against your budget. That way, once it gets to the FMCS and the CCS can tell you things are calculated in units. So they'll have to work with you on calculating the units and making sure that's exactly what's in the budget. Otherwise, the FMCS will come back and say, we need corrections. Second thing to know is participants can use their budgets to pay for staff training and team meetings. Now, we're not certain right now where that is going to appear on the budget line items. We really don't know. So what's very important is that you make sure in your the plan itself that you document that is a need, that is an assessed need, that you have to be able to pay your staff for any kind of training time or for any team meetings. A training time might include attending a 20-hour CMT course that you want to pay that person to attend to. So it's, this is a significant thing. Make sure you note that in the important 2 and important 4 sections of your budget, even if you don't allocate the funds yet. That way, if you go back after your plan is approved, you've already got it justified in your plan. And that comes, another thing that follows is another assessed need. Say you're providing overnight supervision gratuitously, that you just do it. And as a parent, I do it, and I'm happy to do that. But what if something happens to me, right? So that has to be documented in your plan. Overnight supervision is now, it's going to be under important 2 and important 4. That need, even if it's being fulfilled on a voluntary basis, should be documented. That way, if there's a problem later, you have that documented in your plan. That brings me back to the IFDGS, individual family directed goods and services. Right now, there's that $5,000 cap. So, I think to help things run smoothly, probably best to keep your IFDGS items for plans that are being submitted prior to July 1. Keep that cost of those items to $5,000, but document other items that exceed that $5,000 cap in the plan itself. Any IFDGS item you plan to add, make sure you document it under important 2 and important 4. And remember, again, those items should be based on assessed need. What does that person need? What's individual and family directed goods and services would benefit that person's health, that person's well-being, that person's community integration. Document that in important 2 and important 4. And then once July 1, once the cap comes off, then you should be able to get those items by submitting a budget mod, which shouldn't be difficult. It should be, so long as it's already documented, you're in good shape. One more tip is expired budgets are now called auto extend, and the FMCSs will continue to pay at the old rates and services until the new PCP is approved. Next slide.
I'm just going to give you, excuse me, a quick update on FMCS. So there are 3 options. The ARC, GT Independence, and PPL. Sorry. At the moment, DDA has made it so that people cannot change to the ARC or back to the ARC, but at some point we expect that to be lifted. We'll let you know. Just wanted to remind you that EVV and electronic timekeeping are different. It gets confusing because one of the FMCS's systems is called EVI, but they're really separate. EVV is a system that is necessary at the moment for personal supports and respite, and it will geolocate you at a moment in time when you clock in and again when you clock out. Electronic timekeeping uses whatever system, each one of the three have their own, and it merely clocks you in and out. It does not have to be contemporaneous with when the work starts, except for personal supports and respite, at least at this point. So just remember, electronic timekeeping is mandatory, here to stay. So it's really important that you get to know whatever system that your FMCS is using. I know it's hard, change is difficult sometimes, but it's trying it now while we still have some flexibility in using paper backup is a really, really great idea. A lot of people on this call have given input about the caregiver EVV exemption. We have made our plea to the new Secretary of Maryland Department of Health. She has heard us. I'm in contact with her regularly. She is not yet ready to have us say anything about which way it's going to go, but I expect to hear back from her soon. I really do believe she's listened to us carefully, and fingers crossed, I hope we'll get some good news in the future.
Alicia, will you clarify that that's live-in?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. So it's not care, it's live-in caregivers. Thank you, Patty. And so they would be exempt for the personal supports and respite services. So mostly live-in caregivers wouldn't be doing respite anyway. So it would really be personal supports. CDS and other services don't require EVV. Go ahead, Liz.
And what exempt means is you don't have to clock in and out in real time. You can, but if you don't, if you don't clock in and out in real time, if you add a shift later, that's not EVV compliant. So EVV is really the compliance component of electronic timekeeping. If you go in and you change the time or you change the service, that makes it not EVV compliant. So it's that precision in timekeeping that you're exempt from when you get the live-in exemption. You don't have to clock in and out of your life, basically. And there's no penalty for that. Thank you.
Great. I think next slide. And that's you, Liz.
All right. We have 2 new meetings planned. April's meeting will focus on the role of the self-directing participant as an employer. We will discuss the roles and responsibilities associated with employer authority and have a panel of individuals provide their perspective and tips. And in May, we'll focus on the role of the support broker in self-directed services. The support broker has a unique role in the team of people supporting each other, supporting each self-directed participant and their families, and making self-direction more sustainable when families are unavailable to participants. So it's important to have, what I like to say is the support broker is the person that works for the participant. The CCS works for the state. The state is obviously the state, but the support broker is working for the participant. And then in June, we're not sure. So if you could put in the chat if you have an idea for a meeting that you'd like us to consider, please put it in the chat. That's where we're here to help you guys.
So I just want to, first of all, thank you not only for attending this particular webinar and presentation, but for all of your advocacy that you've done throughout the years, and hope you will continue to do. We work really hard. As you know, we're all volunteer. We would love for all of you to volunteer with us on different projects. We would love your donations. It's super important at this point that you join the mailing list. You can do that by going on our website and hitting the join button. It's marylandsds.org. If you're on the mailing list, you'll get notifications of these meetings and also notifications of policies that would require stakeholder input. We would love that you continue to help each other go through these things that are difficult. Some people have figured out interesting ways to do things, interesting activities, interesting uses for things. So share. And then I think at this point, we are going to turn it over to some of the questions on the chat. So I guess you can do the next slide, and then maybe we'll just do the face-to-face thing. So questions and thoughts, put your questions in the chat. If you absolutely can't write and use the chat, raise your hand. If there's some personal or sensitive information you feel like we need to have, please write to us at info@marylandsds.org. And with that said, why don't we go back to people faces and start talking about some of the questions that we got. So I guess there was a lot of interest in individual family directed goods and services, what it can be used for, dental work, or other kind of medical things, nutrition, supplements, speech pathology, and I would love it. Meg, would you want to respond to that?
I think now IFDGS can be used for dental services. I'm not clear about how it covers that. I think it sort of depends on the circumstances. Carol, you might know more about that than I do. What is and isn't covered.
I believe. Oh, go ahead, Carol.
I haven't seen any limits to dental. It's just been there since the beginning, and it's never been removed. So. There was a question about going up to $6,000. As of right now, you can't. So I think the person was getting it in April. There's $5,000. It would have to be in your plan, and it would have to come from unallocated funds. So if you have got $5,000 in unallocated funds, then you would need to start doing a budget mod or something. There's going to be some effort involved, and hopefully you have a support broker that can help you get through that.
It would involve stuff that Medicaid wouldn't cover, correct?
I think that's the key, is that it has to be things that aren't covered under Medicaid otherwise.
Right.
Somebody asked, can more than one family member be staff for a participant? And the answer to that is yes. So somebody would.
The caveat would be if the individual wants to hire more than one family member, right?
Absolutely.
It's
all at the
participants who they would like to have working for them.
And if one of those family members is a support broker, then no other family member can work. And if one of those family members is a designated representative, I'm pretty sure no other family member can work. So you can have two DSPs. If that, again, it should be person-centered. It should be what the person wants to do. So good point, Patty. We can't lose track of that ever. So Alicia, I wrote down some questions too, so I'll just watch and see if you get all the ones I wrote down. So.
Okay, good, great. There's some confusion about what unallocated budget is. I can take a stab at it, or one of you can work on that.
Go ahead, take a take.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. So when you're doing your PCP and you figure out what your assessed needs are, services such as personal support, respite, CDS, job coaching, nursing, they all have rates associated with them. So that you take the number of hours times the rate and of all of the different services, and it gives you what we would call a big number, the total amount of your budget. I believe that's what that DSAT tool or the detailed service, the authorization pages will include that total number that is allocated to the participant for their assessed needs and services. So from that, you would take, you would do your budget sheet and put in, how much you're paying different people for different things, whether you're doing any paid time off or benefits, whether you're doing mileage, if there's money still left, what individual family directed goods and services you wanted. There would be 4 hours of support broker that would be also part of your big budget number. And so once you've gotten to the end and allocated those numbers, whatever is left in that big pot of money would be called the unallocated funds. And at some point, those funds can be used to add more to individual family directed services, to add more support broker hours, to add an admin person to the team if necessary. So, I mean, kind of think about it as all of the services times the hours gives you this pot of money. And once you allocate the pot of money into absolute what you need to have, whatever's remaining would be your unallocated funding. And you can pull from that to fill in other line items in the budget. So I hope that kind of gives you a big picture.
And if you look on your budget, you look at the top of your budget.
Top right.
It has two numbers. One is your total allocated budget, right? And the other one is how much you're spending. So the difference between those two numbers is your unallocated budget. So you can see it. And if you can't find it, ask your CCS or your support broker. They'll show you. But it should be right at the top of that budget. And it is often a significant amount of money.
Somebody was asking whether or not you can increase people's salary with the unallocated funds, and you absolutely can do that. Can family budget more than 4 hours of support broker? And I think the important piece here is that in your budget allocation, we're talking for DDA pays for the first 4 hours. That doesn't come out of the unallocated funds. Anything after that would come in unallocated funds. And with the NSS need, absolutely, those funds can be used for some more support broker hours. There's some questions about the admin position, who can fill it, whether there's going to be a customary hourly rate, whether it can be a DSP, a family member, could it be a vendor?
Can I take that, Alicia?
Yep, please do.
So I think the best way to think about the administrative hours is not as a position. So many of you have identified that this was a need, right? So right now we have personal support, so we have CDS. Those are hours where a staff person is directly involved with the individual. They cannot be paid if they are not with the individual doing supports directly. These will be personal support hours that can be used not doing direct care. So doing those administrative tasks that many of you are doing already, right? So these are hours that can be used that are not direct support. It could be one of your staff people does direct support some hours and then does this some hours, right? It could be a position that you decide to dedicate X amount of hours to a position of administrative. So each team will decide if you need this, how much you need, and how you're going to structure it. But think of it as being able to have hours that are not direct support. We've never had that up till now. Everything has had to be, the person has to be delivering the service directly to the individual to be paid. So think about it that way. So it would be whoever could work to do personal supports anyway. So who you can hire is who you could hire for anything, right? So it's not going to exclude a family member or exclude a DSP or any of that. So just think about it as hours that are not direct support that can be used as admin.
And there was a question that just popped up. Yes, they can overlap because they're not direct support hours. So it's not 2-to-1 support. It's an administrative position and it will be coded that way. So it's not going to be 2-to-1.
Right, and it will look different for every team. How, if you feel you need this and how you need it.
I think we sort of touched on this before, but people were asking about, can people put these things that are going to happen on 7/1 in their current plans? I think Meg sort of covered that. So I'm not sure there are remaining questions, but the idea being that you would document the need and how you might use it, but you won't be able to get approval for the actual numbers in the line item budget until after July 1st. At least that's what we're led to believe at this point. Is that correct, Meg?
That's what I think. And somebody asked, you can do an iPad, buy an iPad under IFDGF. I think some people use assistive technology instead, which I suppose wouldn't come out of your budget if you did it that way. So you might be able to do it that way, but if it's over $1,000, then you'd have to get a what do you call it? An evaluation, right? To see what you would need in terms of assistive technology. So, I think you have two options. I think you could list an iPad under IFDGS.
So that brings up a point, Meg. This is Sunny. I am an SDAN member and I'm also a self-directed services participant. I am looking for a piece of assistive technology. It's called a Braille Note Touch, and I'm glad that you brought that up because my question is, I wrote a document, and Krista's here, my support staff. I'm at Krista's house, and Krista can, touch if she wants to, but I am in the process of getting a piece of equipment, which is over close to $5,000. And I need to justify to DDA why I need this equipment. So do you think that DDA would be able to approve of me getting this equipment because I need it for job applications and jobs?
I think you'd probably benefit from an assistive technology evaluation. I think that's probably, Carol, isn't that what you think?
I think you already had that done, and they have.
Yeah, I already had the assistive technology assessment. Right now, I'm in the process because Doors doesn't think they can pay for the Braille Note Touch. So I'm reaching out to DDA, and I wrote a whole document on why I need it to justify, because this piece of equipment is a lot of money, and the worst thing that could happen is that DDA is going to tell me no.
Well, you might want to reach out to Christy Colberth from.
I think that's a good suggestion. And so I don't want to get too wrapped up in any individual person's pieces, Sunny, but we can talk offline if you need to. And I would think support brokers and CCSs and Christy will be able to give you some valuable guidance in this piece.
Yeah, we should email Christy.
Okay. So the next question came up about access to LTSS, and will it include the participant and the support broker? It's my current understanding that I guess there will be an invitation sent to the participants, and at the participants' discretion, they would be able to invite support brokers. Your CCS already would have access to it. So the idea is that if a participant wished to, they could invite their support broker to have access to the LTSS. I suspect when this becomes available, we'll be getting a DDA webinar on the details of that. There's some detail, people asking detailed questions about the admin. Would they be able to approve hours by the DSPs? And again, I think that might be a policy piece that we'll have to all be involved in.
Just so you know, we have suggested to DDA, again, that support brokers be allowed to do that. That was something support brokers used to help families with. And that would be an administrative role. It might be a more appropriate that the support broker do it, because the support broker would never be a DSP and approving their own time that way. But that is an issue that we are talking to DDA about a lot. So go ahead, Alicia.
Oh, thank you for answering. Patty, somebody's asking, they recently had a SIS evaluation, and can that be used for overnight justification?
No, it would have to be a nursing care plan or nursing recommendations or a behavior plan. And the only nurses that are authorized are nurses who have gone through the two-day DDA nurse training. So you have to be on the DDA approved list as an RN.
Thank you. Somebody else asked if they're agencies for behavior and behavior analysts. And at this point, you can use agencies. There's a list of them on the DDA website, but you can also use sole practitioners. SDAN's been involved in taking the application from a 17 or 18 page document down to a 3 or 4 page easily filled out document, so that individual board certified behavior analysts can do services for people in self-direction. So I would encourage you to reach out to the agencies if you prefer, but also to individual practitioners, and just have them fill out that fairly simple 4-page document in order to be able to do that. Quick question. We've all seen things from DDA about recertification for Medicaid. Anybody feel qualified to give a 2-sentence explanation about that?
It's just why that it needs to be done.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, like we there. So yes, I think the idea is, where did this come from and why are people being asked about it?
Yeah. So that there was an email sent out saying to look out for that. If your person receives SSI, which is supplemental security income, that's for people who have never worked and are low income, then there's no re-eligibility annually. There's no redetermination, if that's the question. But if your person is receiving something else like SSDI, which is you might get through a parent work history, or so SSI is an income-based benefit. And to get DDA waivers, you have to get Medicaid. When you get SSI, you get Medicaid. So you're automatically eligible for the waiver because you've got Medicaid. But if you're not getting Medicaid, sorry to make it complicated, then you have to have a redetermination. You can be on a waiver, but you have to be redetermined for Medicaid in order to be on the waiver, because you're not automatically getting it through SSI. So that's what the redetermination is about. So for anybody getting SSI, getting Medicaid through SSI, there is no redetermination. If your situation is different, you have SSI, you have Medicare, SSDI, Medicare, then there is an annual recertification, because those programs are not income-based and you're not getting the Medicaid. Yeah, so you have to be redetermined. You have to
in a
be
lot of cases, people
by
who
Medicaid.
A lot of cases, people who are getting SSDI and Medicare are also getting Medicaid.
Yeah, you have to have the Medicaid. I kind of said that last bit wrong.
Okay.
You have to be redetermined to see if you're eligible for Medicaid. Because you're not automatically getting it through SSI.
And my understanding was there was sort of a hiatus during the COVID that they just kind of left everybody alone for that period of time. And now that the emergency is ended, the state of Maryland, I think all of the things will be wound up by the end of June. And I think that's why it's coming back at this particular time.
Yeah, they lifted the annual Medicaid recertification during the public health emergency. Exactly.
Yes. Okay. Somebody's asking how many mistakes they can make in EVV. We lobbied successfully to have the final punishment of being asked to leave self-direction removed. So the idea is at this point that people will work with you, individuals, the FMCS, your support broker, your CCS. People will work with the employees and the employer, whoever needs the training, in order to get them where the mistakes have been minimized. You know, obviously we're human and people are going to make mistakes. It will be virtually impossible to be perfect all the time. So there is some allowance for, you know, you forgot to clock in or out. So there's always going to be some allowance for, you know, normal, natural mistakes. I think they're going to be looking to try to have people use the systems in a, you know, more or less regular, correct way. And the idea at this point is that there will be assistance enough to make sure that that happens for people. So while it's good to start working on it and perfecting your technique, there will always be room for an occasional error or two. And please don't panic about that.
And July 1, right? That nothing happens until July 1.
Correct. Nothing happens. And we don't even at this point have a list of what is considered an error. So I would assume that until we know what an error is, there's going to be a little bit less concentration on that. So somebody asked about whether the new act is presented to CCSs and participants. So I don't believe that it will be. I mean, this is what we did today, sort of, for all you guys that came. CCSs, I would assume, will get training on the new waiver. The new waiver should have all of the components of the Self-Direction Act of 2022 in it. So in that way, we hope that everybody will get good and similar training to know what changes are going to be in the new waiver, whether they came for the SD Act of 2022 or not. There have been a lot of questions about overnight respite and whether respite can be used overnight and whether there's any respite providers, whether DSPs can provide respite. Anybody want to take that?
Well, respite can be used over. You know, that's one of the main things that people use it for. So yes, you can use respite overnight, and you can use, you know, one of your typical employees. That you just have to make sure that that employee has the respite code, you know, in available on the app, right? And if not, you have to, your support broker, you submit an employee change form to make sure that it's available. I think there are agencies that provide respite. I don't know much about that. I know most people use their DSPs. Carol?
Yeah, your DSPs can do respite overnight. Anybody can, or you can have a friend or family member hired as a DSP to do that overnight at their own homes. If you don't have to use providers, you just have to be creative and have the ability to find one on your own.
Is there a limit on the number of hours in a 24-hour period you can use respite services?
There's a limit over the year, and I don't know what that is without reviewing the waiver.
But it's probably a good idea not to submit for 24 hours in a row for a particular employee, not the person, but a particular employee. It's not advisable for them to submit for 24 hours in a row.
But it does happen. I mean, I think we've done that. So respite can be used for 24 hours. Typically what would happen in self-direction, typically, I think, is that whatever you were doing during the day, personal supports or CDS or job coaching, whatever what a participant's normal day looks like, that normal day might continue And so
Alicia,
respite
can I
would make
stop
up the
you for a
difference.
second? There's
Yes,
a
please.
lot of feedback. If somebody yeah, it's gone. So somebody muted. Thank you.
Sure. So I think respite can be used, pretty creatively. And somebody did put in the chat, I thought it was 720 hours too for respite under, community pathways. That's per year. But there doesn't seem, I don't believe there's any limit on the number of hours, but I have 24 hours, 2 of those you're in overtime, already 8 hours in overtime. So something to consider as well.
There are a few places that
Alicia.
do respite. The Respite Inn in Carroll County is one of them. Some of the camps run winter weekend programs and programs between Christmas and New Year's. People, if you know of anything else, you guys could put it in the chat to share with other people.
Alicia, Veronica has her hand up.
Okay, Veronica, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you. On the respite piece, so I went through those regs with like a fine tooth comb from the amendment from 2021. I couldn't find anything in there that cited specifically, what the daily hours or anything like that for respite. Historically, if you're providing respite as an agency, it's billed as that like it's like a daily rate. So I felt like it was implied that if it's an hourly rate as a staff, that like same as the old way with like personal, when the participant goes to bed, staff clock out. So I think, I think maybe if we don't know the answers to this, maybe we need some additional guidance there. And to I think a couple of Alicia, you said, we've heard from families that have said, well, my staff never clocked out and FMCS approved it or didn't kick it back. So I think we need some clarity from DDA on like, is there a distinction between those staffing vendors that bill that daily rate and whether or not there's a daily cap on it? If there's no cap, then right, like we need to understand, or families need to understand that overtime piece if you're going to bill the 24/7.
Yeah.
Sounds like there's some more information we can try to get to clarify some of that piece.
Yeah, they'll probably, I would say that, for the 24, they'd probably look for overnight support in the plan. But
I don't
one
think,
comment,
I think, if a family member normally provides gratis overnight supports, that a respite person would be automatically included in that and not need special.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, well, the sleep, you're there, but you're asleep. But yeah, that's
right.
true. That's what it overnight. But one thing I would say about the people putting it in 24 hours and it hadn't been flagged, when paper timesheets are a different animal, now that timekeeping is electronic, it's a lot easier to flag those things, and that might come up more often. Not to say it's wrong or right, just to say it's easier to flag something like that.
Right.
So
There's some continued question.
One thing that we did a while ago was that if somebody was there overnight and they were sleeping, then the rate we had an overnight rate that went down basically to minimum wage. Because they do still need to be there for the supervision piece. They do need to be ready to jump up at a minute's notice and take care of whatever issue comes out. So but we acknowledge that they are sleeping. And if somebody has to be awake overnight, then they should be paid at the same rate, but you shouldn't have one person doing that for 24 hours just by labor rule. So it's pretty individual, and it's pretty up to, as long as they're not overlapping, the FMS probably won't flag it. But it's not best practice to have someone on the clock for 24 hours if they're really awake. And if they're asleep, then you should consider 2 separate rates for that.
Yeah, there's an argument for leaving it ambiguous so people can make these choices. But what was I gonna say? Something about that. I forgot it.
We can come back to it if we need to. So one of the questions was, is DDA updating the budget sheet? And if so, when? So, I mean, at SDAN, we have made comments that the budget sheet does not reflect all of the current needs, and especially with the individual family directed goods and services, if that's going to be used for some kind of an employee role, then there would need to be tax lines and various things in that. So I hope the answer is yes, but I think it will be done, but I don't think there is a time frame that we're aware of. The one other thing that keeps coming up for the last 6 years is a confusion, I think, about rep payee. A rep payee for SSI or SSDI really has nothing to do with the DDA waiver. So it's not germane in whether or not somebody can be a DSP. I just want to kind of lay that to bed. So there are different rules for community first choice, which may be where the confusion's coming from. But for DDA, a rep payee doesn't influence whether or not somebody can work as staff. The question, two questions. One is how to coordinate stakeholder input for policy in the future. How can we communicate that, coordinate that between stakeholders, SDAN and others? And it's a great question. I think we need to kind of figure out a way whether we want to have everybody send in their own, or if we want SDAN to for you to send your stuff to us as well. We'll talk about that and try to figure out a best way forward. Any suggestions are absolutely welcome in that regard. Then there was a question, somebody asked, come July 1st, if you have family as staff, you will be required to have a support broker for some minimum amount of time. I guess we discussed that earlier. So yes, the answer is yes. Come July 1st, if family is staff or participant, the participant will need to have a support broker on their team. All right, Carol, I think I'm coming close to the end of my.
I want to address one more question I see in there. Somebody asked, or Sandy asked, isn't it a HIPAA violation for a support broker to access a participant's medical records, behavioral records, or financial records? We can't drive home enough the point that the participant is in charge. The participant, and if they have a legal guardian or somebody that they've designated to be their person, you make the decisions. I, as a nurse, can't access things unless you give me permission. A support broker should not access any of your information unless you give permission. You are in charge. Now, the CCS has access by virtue of being a state employee and being tasked by DDA to be the liaison, so they can get into the LTSS system and see information. But none of your personal information should be sent to me as a nurse, or I should have access to it unless you have given me permission. And it's up to you all to enforce that. As the employer, don't let people just share your stuff, right? Don't let people take advantage that way. We've known, that I had a son in self-direction too, and in special ed and all that. And people just talk about you and share your information at will. They do that because they get away with it. Don't let people get away with it. They should not have your information or share your information without your permission. You're in control.
Right. And so I think that would be why with the LTSS thing, a support broker would be invited by the participant if the participant wanted that. Somebody asked if a participant no longer needed supervision because they're sleeping. And of course, that would be very person-centered. So some person might not, and some person might. So,
right. I tend to write care plans for folks who could not respond in an emergency and take care of themselves. Right? If the unusual occurred overnight, they would need assistance for their safety. They would not be able to evacuate themselves, or if a stranger knocked on the door and they had to, so, they may be sleeping, but you have to plan for the unusual.
Right. Carol, did you see any other ones that, there's 2 new messages, just looking down. Oh, good. Somebody was saying basically having a support broker is a wonderful thing, and it's been very helpful.
Background, Alicia, that some people might not be aware of, and some of you will. You can certainly appreciate this if you were living through it. There was a time where DDA was adamant or moving in the direction that family could not work as staff. Do you all remember that? Shake your head if you remember when they were trying to eliminate the ability of people to hire their family members. Well, we fought that together and we got that back. A small concession may be that you have a support broker on your team. Right? I know that some of you are reeling against that and have opinions that you shouldn't have to have that. Hey, we are really lucky and grateful that we maintained the option as family as staff. So if we had to roll over a little and agree to a support broker, which we believe is a good part of the team, it's a small concession to maintain the right to hire family. So we don't want to bark too loud on that one.
So somebody's,
Sorry. Alicia.
if you
Hey,
can, hi, Stephanie, if you can write it in the chat, that would be great because we're
Okay.
trying not to, yeah, thank you. Thank you. I
Sure.
appreciate it. Somebody's asking about circling back on the admin support and how it's going to be billed and paid out. And because it's a brand new thing, Carol, do you want to talk about it? It's a brand new thing, so I don't know if we have all the details.
We definitely don't have the details, but it's coming out of, it will absolutely come out of unallocated funds. And if you haven't seen that part on your, I don't know if you can see it. I'm trying to, up in the top right-hand corner, this is going to be the total that comes off of the plan. And this is going to be what you've allocated on the budget sheet. And then this tells you how much you have left over. So what comes out of unallocated funds, the rate is a lot higher than wages. Wages and rate are not the same thing. So if you have a rate of, I can't even think of what the rates are, but let's just say $50 for CDS, and you're paying your staff $25 an hour for CDS, there's $25 in there to pay for benefits, transportation, and now this administrative position will be one of the things, or put some money toward IFDGS. So there's going to be choices like anybody has to make with their budget, but you have a big budget because of the rates. That gives you more choices than self-direction has ever had in the past. So the administrative position is going to be one that comes out of those rates. And so you might not be able to pay staff as much money as you could because of the rate. You have to choose, I'm going to pay this, I'm going to cap the staff at $25 an hour, and I'm going to have this administrative position, and I'm going to pay mileage reimbursement and training. There's choices. That's where your employer budget authority comes in. You have choices when you get this big pot of money. The LTS, the service authorization, and I have that here too. This is an important section. Yeah, I'm trying to show you. This is an important section of your plan. Where is it? There it is. Service authorization. That's where all of your services are broken down. And one of them will be, if you have a support broker, you can go up to 4 hours a month. That is added to your big budget total. If you go over 4 hours a month, then it's got to come out of unallocated funds. Maximum rates for staff are on a DDA document that I am referring to almost on a daily basis. And
so remember, rates and wages different.
So we can attach that document. And I just want to tell everybody, I put the latest CMS guidelines in the chat so that you can go in there and look for IFDGS, because CMS, the Self-Direction Act said that is the rule. What is in CMS is the rule. The rule is hard to follow, and the rule isn't real explicit, and that's on purpose. So there will probably still be some fights under IFDGF to prove that what you're asking for meets the CMS guidelines. But we encourage everybody, and especially support brokers, to know these things. A good support broker does this and is there to help guide you through this process.
Now that you brought it up, Carol, I just wanted to make sure everybody knows there's a difference between rates, the hourly rate for a service, and wages, reasonable and customary wages for your DSP.
Great. then so those two documents, I'm going to make myself a note. We will send you the current rate document, which is going to change effective July 1, because there's going to be the COLA, and there's going to be an additional amount of money that the new governor has put in. It supposedly was 12, whether it makes 12%, whether it makes it out of the legislature is still to be determined. And last year, finally, DDA let people write their wages based on the new rates if their plan was effective July 1 or later. If your plan is effective before then, you have to use the current rates. You can't project the July 1 rate.
But you can go back and use your unallocated funds after July 1. If there is a rate increase, you can go back and kind of collect that with a budget mod.
Please explain how a CCS should write the DSA. Okay, I lost it wouldn't be in the it wouldn't be in the service authorization. It would be described in the plan that you're using it for. You're using unallocated funds to increase it to, and technically, that we need more guidance from DDA, because DDA doesn't see, nobody in DDA sees the budget sheet anymore. That would just be something that you could allocate on the budget sheet, but unless DDA says it has to be in there, so there's a lot of to be determined right now. And we are on weekly, bi-weekly contact with DDA over this kind of stuff. So we'll send you the current wage document, and we'll put the reasonable and customary wages.
It's probably smart for everybody to kind of go on the DDA site and start familiarizing yourself with how to search there and where to find information, so that you can be your own first step in research. People have asked specifically, gosh, now I've lost my train of thought, how to appeal DDA decisions, and I'm not sure that that's what the person meant. So sometimes you put in your plan and there's they deny something or they ask for clarification. So at that point, you can provide additional information that may sway DDA that your feeling of an assessed need would be approvable. There are very concrete and strict provisions of what happens if you do get denied for a service. There's a whole procedure, which we can't really go into now, but your CCS and your support broker will know how to help you through that process if you choose to do that. But if you're just talking about a clarification, if DDA comes back and says no on something, perhaps you can provide additional information that might sway them to a yes. So just wanted to mention that in case people were, if that was what people were looking for. Let's see. I think we're kind of come to the end.
Can I address one thing that Dennis brought up in the very beginning? I think Dennis wrote in the very beginning that, we all have a duty to kind of, let people know about self-direction. It's certainly something SDAN believes in, to the point that we've made several videos that talk about self-direction that are on our website that you could all use. So, how do we spread the word about the opportunities that people have in self-directed services? I think each one of us do that. SDAN can only do so much. We produce the videos, take them, use them, spread them. They're on the website. So Meg did a great job of pulling that off a project a couple of years ago. So use them and then just be talking about it in your own circles. But we're not doing a particular PR campaign about self-direction. We are too busy dealing with DDA and their messes. So
there was one other question about sustainability. What's the status of that? We did put in a request with help from someone volunteering their time to write the grant. We did put in a request for a grant through the ARPA funds that DDA had for the a sustainability investigation beginning the process of gathering information and coming up with options. Like we said, the admin position is part of that, can be part of that, and getting the support broker to have up to 30 hours can be part of that. Getting some of those tasks, the mom job, off to paid people that will hopefully be with the participant for the long term. Some of you have to hire a younger support broker than me to do that, but you know, there are younger support brokers out there and people that could wind up being there for the long term. So we haven't dropped sustainability. We hope to know next week.
All right, I think we need to come to a close. Thank you all so very much for being here, and thank you for the donations. It really does help us fund the things we need to do, that just even the programs that we use to do the Zooms and to email you. So we really appreciate any donations you can send. Please keep in touch with us, info@marylandsds.org. Use those videos at the same website, www.marylandsds.org. Join us. If you're not on the mailing list, please join us. And please keep your eyes and ears open for opportunities to influence policy the way you as a stakeholder wish to see it published. So thanks again, everyone. Hope you have a great afternoon.